I grew up on a farm, and when I graduated high school, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was ever set foot on a farm again. One night I thought, hell, if anyone can pull this off, it's me. So I'm going to start a company and I'm going to start taking autonomy into agriculture. I think autonomy is going to solve the biggest problem in agriculture right now. I don't think it's labor, it's profitability. I think autonomy is going to bring horsepower down, and I think it's going to bring it down to the point where it's commoditized.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Bricks and Bytes podcast, where we dive into construction and AEC technology. Before we get started though, if you're a startup founder or operator responsible for innovation in your company, or you want a deeper, more insightful look into technology in AEC, you won't want to miss our newsletter. From deep dives into particular technologies such as AI, robotics, design, software, and so on. Hot takes from investors betting big in AEC technology, and advice on building tech companies, including the stories and takeaways of the most successful AEC technology founders. Head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today to get this exclusive material straight to your inbox. And now for the episode.
Hi, Craig. Thank you for making time for me.
Gabriel, hey, thank you for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Hey, as I told you like a few seconds ago, I only have one question that's set up for guests. The rest is free form, so that's also something that the audience should know. I've met you once. We've talked about your past and the company. I was pretty baffled by your background, how it fits well with what you're building today. And I just honestly just want to ask you, what's your background? What's your story? How did that lead you to found Sabanto?
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting story. I grew up on a farm, and when I graduated high school, the last thing in the world I wanted to do was ever set foot on a farm again. A lot of work. I thought I was cursed. I always say I was the spare, not the heir. And I became an electrical engineer and thought I would never work in agriculture or deal with farmers ever again in my career. I thought it was a unique upbringing, but I wanted to go on to bigger and better things. And I became an electrical engineer, and I spent the majority of my career in wireless. Every cell phone that you can probably name, I've either worked for them or with them. And I did do a stint at John Deere in my career, and I worked there for 3 years and developed the Starfire receiver and the Green Star display for them. And that kind of brought me back into ag tech, and I thought it was interesting. It was an interesting, I guess, area that it never dawned on me to even consider it in my career choice. But I started looking as to, the different innovations coming out of agriculture. And, agriculture is kind of it's a really interesting, I guess, industry in that if you're a mechanical engineer, there's work for you. If you're an electrical engineer, there's work for you. If you're a wireless person, there's work for you. It's just it takes quite a lot of talent, different types of talent to be in agriculture. Whereas when I was in the wireless world, you're an electrical engineer, you're doing signal processing, RF circuit design. It's mostly electrical engineers. But when I went into agriculture, there's a lot of diverse talents required. And I looked at my background, electrical engineer. I knew controls. I knew farming, and I started looking at just the skill set that I thought would take to bring autonomy into agriculture, and I checked a lot of those boxes. And it just one night I thought, hell, if anyone can pull this off, it's me. So I'm going to start a company, and I'm going to start taking autonomy into agriculture.
Okay, as easy as that. Then let's do this. Why don't you define in 2 sentences what Sabanto's doing? And I have a bunch of questions that I think will uncover some of the interesting stuff behind what you're building.
Okay, so the two-sentence description of Sabanto is, we create a retrofit kit that attaches to off-the-shelf tractors, turning them into autonomous tractors. And albeit John Deere, Kubota, Fendt, and there's going to be other makes and models of tractors, but we take the tractor that's already sitting in their machine shed and we turn it into an autonomous tractor.
So this is a concept that I love in robotics of today. The concept of retrofitting existing equipment, either as a reuse of existing equipment that already sits in someone's site. In this case, we're talking about a farm, or even in the assembly line of a new piece of equipment, where essentially you're retrofitting existing machinery that a very established OEM has already built and has very well known footprint. People know replacement parts, know operating procedures, and all of that, and you're adding to it smart controls, autonomy, and other attachments and stuff that makes that machine much more valuable. I just want,
Yeah,
yeah, tell me.
and another thing I want to add to that is, from the get-go, we saw autonomy as an accessory
Yeah.
to off-the-shelf tractors. I don't think autonomy is an all or nothing proposition. I still see tractors with seats and steering wheels. Tractors have utility above and beyond just field operations. And, when I started the company, I thought, I don't want to build a new piece of equipment. I want to leverage as much as I can that's off the shelf. And it became apparent to me that creating an accessory that gets installed on an off-the-shelf tractor was the way to go. And I look at it like this, and this is the example I always give. Everyone has cruise control on their cars, right? You do not use cruise control to back your car out of the garage. And cruise control is a tool, and it has its use, but it's not an all or nothing proposition.
Yeah, I agree. I I love that vision because it's not at that binary stage where you say, "Oh, we got to turn everything to autonomous." Actually, no, you might be limiting the usage of that machine if that machine is only designed to be autonomous. And that's why I want to spend some time on the concept of retrofitting. Can you give me um, a unorthodox, high level, tiny lecture, what it means to retrofit existing equipment from a
Okay.
technical perspective, essentially?
Yeah, so we install controllers and sensors on the system. We have our main controller, which is our pathfinding module or PFM. That has all the compute, that has cellular connectivity, that has Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, multiple CAN buses, a lot of discrete digital input output. And that is the main controller that we install on the tractor. And then we put peripherals around there. We have 12 cameras we put around it. We have a time of flight sensor for obstacle detection as well. We put a radar system on there as well, cellular antennas, some actuators, and a hydraulic system to control the steering of the tractor, and just some various other small sensors to monitor various aspects of the tractor and the implement itself.
Okay, interesting. So what that looks like is, how long of an implementation does that entail?
To install on a tractor, it takes less than a day, and that
Interesting.
is installed and calibrated as well.
Was installation time one of the things that you optimized for when you started thinking about retrofit kit?
Yeah, obviously installation is key. So we have currently in the US and throughout Canada, we have 12 dealers right now,
Mm.
and they're responsible for installing and supporting our customers.
It's actually a really interesting one that I want to get into. The dealership model, it's one that scares off a lot of the a new entrant startups that are trying to do anything mobile, right? So anything that moves, that has to go into work environments like construction sites, farms. You can think of anything of that sort. Today gets clearly bought through dealers. You have dealers that are local. They might verticalize with a repair shop, but it turns out that for some reason that seems to be a very cumbersome and incumbent only type of route for a new entrant business. How
Yeah.
did you think of that? What's the trade-off? What did that cost you essentially? And what's the good side of it?
Yeah. Uh, that's a very good question. And early on, so I've dabbled in agriculture quite a lot, and agriculture is a relationship type sales funnel or model. And I wish, boy, do I wish that people would just come to my website and order an autonomy system, and all we have to do is ship them out, and someone magically installs it. If you're looking at seed, machinery, inputs, fertilizer, agriculture again is a very relationship based sales process. And these personal relationships are what companies leverage these personal relationships to make to meet farmers and make sales with farmers. Like it or not, that's the way it is. And I think that's the way it is in Europe as well. I mean, farmers just don't, there's been a lot of companies that, they tried to become the quote Amazon of ag, and they're not doing too good because it's still, you've got to have, boots on the ground, selling to farmers, getting to know them. Maybe you're not going to get this year. Maybe they're going to try your product next year. But that was always on the back of my mind. And then meanwhile, there's this certain class of, and I'm seeing this more often, but there's a certain class of dealers and distributors who've embraced ag tech. You go to a lot of equipment, OEM equipment dealers. They love selling iron, and they don't like selling silicon. And and meanwhile, there's this group of dealers out there that fully embraced ag tech. They're not selling iron; they're selling silicon. They're selling software. They're selling technology to help farmers, in their field operations, and they're out there, and we identified them, and we work really exceedingly close with them.
Okay. And that's interesting because what you're saying is there are some dealers that are more tech forward and want to push innovation in the industry. And I'm sure that has a mirror also with the customers that you work with. So I'm sure there's the type that says they will never adopt technology because it doesn't like it, but there's also the type that has just gone through a succession plan. So it's a second generation, third generation, fourth generation farmer that wants to adopt. So you were talking to me about there was this interesting model that you put out there. It's like there's a farmer, has a kid. This kid doesn't like being on the farm, goes to college, but actually he loves being where he was born. So he comes back, picks up the business, but refuses to run it like his dad. And
Yeah.
and wants to run it differently. Can you speak a bit about what is this mentality? And maybe you can contextualize it within the state that you started Sabanto into, because I think Iowa is also um, one of the epicenters of where a lot of this is happening. A lot of trade schools, a lot of farming, and a lot of this education coming together.
Yeah, and we see that a lot. Whenever you step foot on a farm, there's a 55 plus year old father who is responsible for the farm, and then they have a 20 to 25-year-old son or daughter, and with each new generation, they want to do things differently. They want to do some things the same and some things differently than the previous generation, their father or their grandfather. Some of the grandfathers were farming with horses, and then they
Yeah.
made the move to tractors, and then the father then took it to the next step, and then the younger generation comes in, and they're you know if you look at them now, I mean, there are every kid now grew up with the internet. There was no internet when I was a kid, and these are very tech focused, welcoming young people. And again, every time I set foot on a farm, there's this 20, 25-year-old younger person who, hell yeah, they want to do autonomy. They want to, this is cool. This is fun. This is interesting. It's going to take their farming operations in a completely different direction, and they're signed up for it.
Yeah. And then there's a question of essentially the economic incentive. What I think it's really interesting about the proposition that Sabanto is pushing to its customers is the concept of reducing capex significantly by adopting automation without necessarily having to cut on the opex. You're not targeting the driver, you're actually targeting the wasted expense on large systems. Can you essentially elaborate on this? What do you pitch? So because this is very interesting, like how does a pitch go to one of these farmers, and how do they understand it economically that Sabanto is a way to go?
Yeah. So let me tell you what I'm seeing, and I guess my experience, having deployed, between 150, 200 tractors out into this autonomous systems out into the wild. Um, does autonomy solve the labor problem? Um, it sort of does, but everyone's looking to autonomy from day one. Everyone looked at autonomy like, oh, this is the solution of the labor problem. And the example I always give, and I'll reiterate it here again, is if you look at Thomas Edison when he created the phonograph, everyone looked at the problem he was trying to solve, which was music in the home. And if you step back and look at what exactly the innovation was that Thomas Edison, he found a way to play back audio. 30 years prior to him figuring out a way to play back audio, everyone knew how to record audio. Nobody knew how to play it back. Edison figured out how to play it back. And if you just look around you, this podcast, the record industry, AM and FM radio, broadcast radio, podcasts, books on tape, um, the cellular phone, that idea of playing back audio was really the innovation. And put music in the home aside, there's massive industries that got built up just because he figured out how to play back audio. And when you look at, and I think people are myopic in viewing autonomy and, oh, it's here to solve the labor problem. Okay, I've deployed 150 to 200 systems. You know what I'm seeing out in the market? People are adopting autonomy for quality of life. They don't have to work 12, 14 hours a day. And they're keeping ahead. And when they get behind, they don't have to have their workers work 14 hours a day because we'll just run them at night. And let's just and we'll run them on Saturday instead of making our all our employees come in on Saturday. They can take Saturday off and they get a day off, the weekend off. So it's quality of life. The second thing is a lot of farming operations that we work with, they're trying to scale. They're trying to take on more acres with the people they have. And there's other type A work that these laborers can do other than sit on a tractor and go back and forth. So they're using it for quality of life and scale, not necessarily replace labor. Now, when I go to this, and we're going into more broad acre type farming operations, I'm starting to see exactly what I predicted back in 2018, 2019. James Watt tells us horsepower equals work divided by time. Autonomy increases time. That's really what it does. It increases the amount of time available for field operations. If you increase time, horsepower and time are inversely proportional. You increase time, you decrease horsepower. It's not only a good idea, it's the law. And these and I give you an example. A farmer up in Montana called us, and he was running a Steiger 500 with a 60-foot cedar behind it, and it was getting a little long in the tooth, and tried to replace it, and the price came out at $2 million. And he basically said, I can't do this anymore. I'm not going to spend $2 million. If I spend $2 million, it's going to be for land. And he started looking at going in the other direction. What if I use smaller tractors? What would that cost me? And it turns out it would save him 70% by going with smaller, less expensive, systems running them 24 hours a day versus one large system running at 12 hours per day. And so it turns out he can get by, with reducing his capex greatly by going with autonomy. And I think a lot of farming operations we're starting to sell to farmers who are capital expense cautious or conscious, and what they want to do is they know that in the long run, we're going to reduce our per acre costs by going with smaller equipment. And it turned out, I mean, up in Montana, in that farmer's case, he's saving over $12 an acre by going with smaller equipment. And you can put aside the compaction and a better resale market. It's just straight up $12 per acre.
Okay. So I love the physics behind the first principle thinking that you just explained. It's like the power is the integral of labor, the integral is over time. That integral, if you spread it over more time, you can actually have smaller systems. And land doesn't depreciate, equipment does.
Bingo.
That's actually the key balance sheet problem here. So there's a balance sheet problem and there's a cash flow problem from the customer that has to put up more money in high interest rates times, in high uncertainty times. And so what you want people to go for the smaller equipment. Can you break down for me, sorry if I want to go so specific, but I'm very interested. How should I think of the use cases in terms of maybe it's crop, maybe it's type of land, where this is doable and where it's not doable to have a smaller tractor work for you? And then essentially, where does adoption have the least friction within the doable set and then the most strict friction within the doable set?
Okay. So the technology is continuing to be, I guess, features continue to come out. The technology keeps progressing. I'll give you an example. Terraces, like right now, if you have terraces on your land, that's exceedingly difficult right now. I think for all companies chasing autonomy, terraces might cause a problem. There are certain crops that are harder than others. I'll give you an example. Cultivating corn or soybeans is exceedingly difficult compared to uh, drilling wheat. I think some of the row crop operations are some of the most difficult ones out there. Um, there's when I look at the farmers that I talk to, there are a lot of farmers that like driving large equipment. They, it is why one of the reasons why they farm is they get to run big equipment. That's and I get it, and I understand that it's tractor therapy. You know, you know, good for you. But there are other farmers that we're focused on. They're more fiscally astute, and they're looking for how can I maximize my margins in agriculture. And they're looking at various ways, albeit through, the seed that they use, the amount of fertilizer put down, doing variable rate, and then also looking at their equipment as well, running smaller equipment, longer hours. So there's a certain group of people, and we're focused solely on them, thinking that if I start to become the norm and there's a lot of people running smaller equipment, then what will happen is the larger organizations uh, will 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 take notice.
And it's interesting because as you start to move towards autonomous operations on the field, there's a world of other applications that can actually intersect very well with the actuation of machines that go up and down the field to maybe seed, water, etc. What is the ecosystem of a very tech forward farm? I want to do like this very little sci-fi digression to try to understand what your thinking is. If you were to if you had infinite R&D capacity and infinite capex, and you wanted to build the most tech forward and autonomous, or at least efficient farm that you could think of, what else would you chain to the innovation of having autonomous tractors? Is it drones for mapping, satellite information to understand what, like, how would you build a stack of a tech forward farm?
Well, I think recently we're starting to run autonomous systems over Starlink,
Mhm.
and I don't think the ag industry globally understands just how that is going to change agriculture, especially in Brazil.
Interesting.
Mato Grosso, you're out in the middle of nowhere there, and I remember when I worked at the for Climate slash Monsanto, Mato Grosso, there was no connectivity out there. They didn't even know the weather that they got in those areas, and now it just overnight it opened up, and you're going to see some really interesting things um, coming out of Brazil. Um, Communications was always an issue, but I think that is seemingly solved. I think. Um, I think the biggest hindrance right now is just the rollout of the technology. As ag tech uh, improves and becomes ubiquitous, it's going to take a special type of person to deploy and support it out in the field. And I think that's one of the problems a lot of large OEMs are trying to, I guess, get their hands around is how who are these people? Where are these people? How are they going to support this as time goes on? And I think that's one of the deterrence right now with ag tech.
Interesting. Okay, so
Hey listeners, I want to take a quick break to remind you about the Bricks and Bytes newsletter. If you're interested in learning about the technology shaping the future of construction, you won't want to miss the valuable insights we share each week. To get this exclusive content delivered straight to your inbox, head over to www.bricks-bytes.com and sign up today. Link is in the show notes. Back to the show.
you know what this seems to me? I I feel like drawing a parallel with the industrial automation word, where essentially what you have robotic arms, versatile, strong, known
Yeah.
documentation, power requirements are getting better, so you don't even have to have these giant facilities to actually run one of them. But the people that can program these bots are very few. The ecosystem from the OEM standpoint is actually staying close because you have this oligopoly of like 5 different robot manufacturers that want to stay insulated one from the other. So they will never adhere to a common operating system because they think software is their moat. And then essentially what you get mid-size manufacturing operations that want to adopt automation, but their biggest problem is having people that come to their premises and know what they're like, learn on the spot what the manufacturing operation needs, know how to set up these bots, and can flexibly in the future come and reprogram it for different use cases, right? So this is what we call like forward deployed engineers. You can call them whatever, right?
Yeah.
And these are like field engineers, people that come and understand things on the field. How have you solved for that? Like what's the trick to go and deploy so many robots? What is the
Yeah.
shortage like? Where do we
You know
find it?
what? I mean, that's a perfect analogy. It's the same thing. So I used to work in high volume manufacturing.
Uh-huh.
It's the same thing. I mean, it takes a special person to you need access to this special person when you're running these manufacturing plants in the middle of nowhere, or in I shouldn't say in the middle of nowhere, but in the remote part of China and and all these countries and whatnot. The same thing. It's actually worse in agriculture because there's like in the state of Iowa, there's 99 counties. You need 99 people. So I've been watching this closely, and drones in agriculture is starting to take off. And I shouldn't say starting. For the last year, 2 years, there's been more acres sprayed by drones than the year before. And I talked with a lot of farmers, and they all say the same thing. Every farmer I talked to said, "Yeah, we've got some kid in the county who, got a couple drones and started a drone spraying." And I wanted to meet these kids who are doing this. And so here's what I'm finding, and this is interesting as hell. Um, you take these small communities in the U.S. specifically. And there's usually one kid who graduates high school, and he didn't grow up on a farm, but he's interested in agriculture. I don't know if he played Farming Simulator or what, but then he went to the local. He got a local went to the local college and got a 2-year degree in ag management or something like that, right? And then he graduated, and then he's in this little town in uh, and he grew up there, and he likes the town he grew up in. Maybe his high school sweetheart that he married is from that area, but for one reason or another, he wants to stay in the area where he grew up. And something like, I don't know, 70% of the people in the U.S., something like that, is where they're living within an hour of where they were born. nonetheless, they want to live in this small community, and they're really into agriculture. They're technically astute. And what they do is they get the money together some way somehow, and they buy a drone, and they put a shingle out, and they start a drone spraying company. And I've talked to a couple who are doing exceedingly well. They start with one drone, and next year they've got three, and they're covering some serious acres, and they're making a really good living by just contract spraying with drones. And farmers love them over crop dusters because they can get into tighter places and according to them, do a better job. And they're a hell of a lot cheaper than the helicopter or the drone or even, if you look at some of these applicators, I mean, they're $750,000, right? You get some of these applicators, they cost so much. It's how do you how and then meanwhile someone goes out with a $15,000 drone, and I would hate to be making applicators right now with what I'm seeing in the market.
So everything is getting smaller, not only the actuation within, on the field, you got, smaller drones, smaller cycle times. You can
Mm-hmm.
actually do things faster. Are these the kids that you would want to hire to go and integrate your systems?
Absolutely. You know what? The day, and I'll go back to Thomas Edison, what I talked about earlier. Um, th- I see a day where each of these owns a fleet of autonomous tractors, small tractors, and they're doing field operations and for local farmers, just like what they're doing with their little drones.
Yeah. As of today, what do you think is the biggest set of constraints that you still face in the adoption that you think will be anything that you have reason will be overcome? So, for example, I'm interested in understanding what does a farmer, why would a farmer say no? I understand that, like, I like driving big tractors. That,
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
that's a big one, I'm sure. But what will you do to your retrofit kits? What is it that your product roadmap will enable to remove when it comes to the inertia of adopting these systems?
I think over the last 2 years, we've gone from this is a batshit crazy idea to it's not if, it's when. And I'm starting to see that now as the OEMs and the industry, the publishers and whatever, when I think everyone's realized that it's a foregone conclusion that autonomy will play a part in agriculture. And if I went back 2 to 3 years ago, a lot of farmers saw the technology, they thought it was cool, and I think they asked themselves, am I, is this going to be the future? I mean, and if I bought an autonomy system, is this going to is this really going to be the future? And if you look at today, with everyone talking about it, the farmers realize that again, it's not when or if, it's when. And and what's interesting is now I'm seeing farmers, and they're starting, I should say, they're starting to see the light because they're every farmer I talk to, when I go into, listen, autonomy is there's going to be a swarm of smaller machines versus one very expensive. And it's apparent to them. They say, I believe that. I understand that. That makes sense to me. And it's obvious. It's, if you're out there with let's say a 9RX, nothing against Deere, but a 9RX pulling a 60-foot cedar, if one shank goes out, you're at 0% throughput. Meanwhile, if I have three, 15-foot systems out running, one goes out, I'm at 66% throughput. And so I think people, they get that. They get the cost savings. They're like, oh my God. And then they're like, oh, what about compaction and the fuel savings and whatnot? They understand that as well. And so they completely buy into the whole concept of, instead of buying, spending $2 million on a piece of equipment, I can get by with spending less than 500,000 with smaller equipment that I can put in the machine shed, because some of this equipment is so large they can't put it in the machine shed. Can you believe, I talked to a farmer, can you believe writing a check for $1 million for a piece of equipment and it sits outside all year long, over the winter, over the harsh summers? It's insane. And it's just because the equipment is so large, and you just can't afford to build a machine shed to hold that equipment. So every farmer I talk to, they get it, and I'm smiling because this is going to completely change agriculture. And again, I go back to, it all comes back in the beginning when I was talking about how labor is the least of the problems. I think autonomy is going to solve the biggest problem in agriculture right now. I don't think is labor; it's profitability, and one of the line items in profitability is capital expenses.
Yeah.
Like it, I mean, and nobody likes to talk about it. Nobody likes. I mean, it's something that everyone just, it's the way it is.
Those are the quiet places where you can innovate, I think, the best. The places where nobody wants to talk about things.
Nobody wants to talk about it.
I have a question. I'm completely blind on this. Um, what are the OEMs doing?
Um, all right, and sometimes I get in trouble for being honest, or just saying it the way it is. All the large OEMs are focused 100% on the innovator's dilemma. What they're doing is they're improving the products that they have out in the market. So they're improving the Steiger, the Magnums, the 9RXs, the 8Rs, the large stuff.
Okay. And then the autonomy stack. So one thing that I want to try to understand is there's a worldview where the OEMs try to go the autonomy route and still leaves behind a gigantic fleet of existing equipment to retrofit. Huge opportunity for retrofitting. And still you will have farmers that buy non-autonomous equipment and essentially have need for autonomies emerge later, right? So I think the thesis of the retrofit kit holds even if you have the OEM stack that suddenly focuses on autonomous models, right? But one
Mhm.
question that I have is there a world where the OEMs actually don't want to go after autonomy themselves because they think they are risking less and they're seeing good players act as middlemen to integrate that autonomy. And they're essentially like, they're keeping their costs low. They don't have to deploy field engineers that much. Autonomous systems maybe break down more than, pure hydraulics that's driven by a farmer. So I want to understand what's your best guess here, right? How's this going to play out? Or at least what's the evidence that you see that people should take in and make their own prediction on?
I think, so I've said this from day one. I think we peaked in horsepower. I think autonomy is going to bring horsepower down, and I think it's going to bring it down to the point where it's commoditized. If you get down to, Gabriel, if you get down to 150 horsepower, that's commoditized. And my best example is I at one time I used to work for Motorola, and I saw the beginning of the end of Motorola. And what the beginning of the end was, Motorola was one of the greatest RF companies in the world. And then what happened was there were these companies, Broadcom, Qualcomm, Texas Instruments, and a whole host of others that commoditized RF. And it was freely available. You did not need an expertise to do RF anymore. And I was at the Farm Progress show and I saw the latest 9RX 830 tractor. It's a work of art. It is absolutely a modern marvel. And you're talking to the guy that used to work on. I used to work on satellites, and when I looked at that 9RX 830, I thought this is one of the most complicated, a hell of a lot more complicated than a satellite, by the way. Satellites are really,
100%.
yeah. But I looked at the hydraulics, the frame, the engine, the traction, the transmission. I'm like, these guys are just incredibly, I mean, talented. Where do you get that? But I just couldn't help but thinking, if autonomy brings horsepower in the other direction, all that set's going to be irrelevant, and and it's going to be Motorola deja vu, and I think that might happen. I think it will happen. To be honest with you,
Interesting.
that's this is my I mean, it's my opinion, and you can disagree with me, but
I don't think I do at all. I think it makes sense. I think
and that's why everyone,
yeah,
everyone, it's like when I say it, I'm like, how do you not see this?
yes, I agree with you. And that's why I am very interested. So when we look at autonomy, right? What's holding back autonomy today in the wider world of mobile bases, right? We're talking cars, trucks, um, truck plus trailer combos, any planes, everything is essentially a regulatory. It's essentially a regulatory drag that wants to protect people with more or less conservatism, involved, right?
Hmm.
Off-road autonomy outside a public road where you can't hit another car, where it's really difficult to kill a human, can happen, right? But like it's really difficult to run over someone and run over something of huge value. It's where it's coming first. It's farms, it's truck yards. I did not know this, but people hire like 10 drivers at a time to sit in truck yards to move containers from one parking spot to the other, right? So like
Absolutely.
so this is like huge expenses that you can cut off with, really easy trailers that go hook up that 3-point hitch, move the thing, park themselves back, right? It's really safe. Um, ISEE, one of the company doing this. It's interesting. You should look it up. But essentially, what I see is the bottleneck now. So what I'm really focused on is that place where conservatism doesn't play a role. And yet, when I look at the autonomy stack and all of the companies that are trying to build for it, what you see is a ton of companies that are building, you know, more interesting sensor stacks that are like you can sense more, you can see more. Some software stack that is very complicated. What's your take there? That because from in my opinion, the integrated version of the company is the only one that can win, because in the end, you're controlling your product end to end. You're building a retrofit kit, you're going to install it in people's fleet, and you're going to fix it when when it breaks down. And I don't understand the role of the entire rest of the value chain that has to do with autonomy, unless it is, petabyte scale data collection for, models that are doing on-road autonomy. So I want to understand, what's the archetype of the company that wins these races? Is it vertically integrated? Is it, super specifically focused on one piece of the value chain of autonomy? How do you see it?
Hmm. That's a really complicated question. Um, First of all, I think I think the one thing that I don't think people in agriculture understand, they don't get to enjoy the commoditization of technology.
Interesting.
And I'll give you an example. Um, Farmers pay, you know, it's unheard of. It's not unheard of paying $8,000 for a GPS system. Now, granted, they're dual GPS, L1, L2, whatever, right? But um, there's not a $2,000 GPS receiver in this. It's probably a $5 to $10
Yeah.
at most. And so the question is why there's a lot of technologies again that are being commoditized. Cameras are the algorithms um, for computer vision, for detecting obstacles. AI is getting commoditized too. All this technology is getting commoditized, and unfortunately, I don't think agriculture gets to enjoy the commoditization of technology, unlike other industries. And I think I see a future again. And why is that? And I think part of it is, um, you control the platform that thereby which that technology gets installed in and operates in. And so there's kind of a gatekeeper. And this is, and I'm not picking on anyone. This is the entire industry. And I think I see a future where um, people are going to be less brand loyal. They're going to be more cost conscious, uh, and and I think there's going to be a lot of companies out there that are going to start deploying open type platforms where people are where you can install your own technology on your system.
Essentially, my question was like, what's the archetype of a company that delivers autonomy? Should it be a vertically integrated one that owns everything from the sensor stack to the perception and the integration, or should it be someone that hyper focuses?
I think I think as time goes on, you're going to start seeing an open platform where people add different sorts of technologies into their agriculture system. They're going to be using one perception system, one hardware system. They're going to use one ag MIS FIS type system. They're going to use a different auto steer. They're going to use a different path planner. I see a future where there's going to be a lot of contributors to technology in agriculture, as opposed to a one-stop shop where you have to use this. And I, th- I think I think as time goes on, you're going to start to see those companies rise from the ashes. That they're going to provide a certain aspect or a certain function in agriculture that is far superior than anyone else, and people are going to be in demand. And what's interesting is, and again, it's the next generation coming in. They expect that
Yeah.
from their providers. I mean, they get that from their computer. Not everything is Apple on this. Um, I use a lot of applications on there that are non-Apple, and I'm not waiting around for Apple to develop everything that I need. And I think the younger generation demands that, and I think you're going to start to see that with the next generation of farmers coming down the pipe.
And it's interesting to understand how this ties to business models, which is the last point that I wanted to touch with you. It's essentially very very bluntly, what's the right business model to sell autonomy into farms at this point? I wanted to generalize it to off-road sites, but now I'm thinking that it's that the project economy, it's such a complicated place to do things that there's gonna have some variance. So what's the best way to sell to farmers?
Well, at this point in time, um, let me tell you what works for us. You can send them a video of an autonomous tractor performing a field, and they're like, "That is neat." You can meet them at a trade show and show them an autonomous tractor running, and they're like, "Oh, we could use that." Um, but then if you ask them, "Would you be interested in getting one?" Hands down, every last farmer I talked to said, our fields are different. I'm going to have to see this thing running on my fields before I will commit. And so the onus is on you to haul a tractor and show them it working in their field operations. You can give field demos, you can do anything, and at the end of the day, they want to try it before they buy it.
Yeah.
And that has been my experience. And I have demo tractors. I have one on the road right now. Probably 1,000 miles from here, on the road going to the next farm site where we will be demoing. And what I do is we unload it, hook it up to their implement, let him train them for 2 hours, and then we let them use it for about a week to 2 weeks. And then you like it, you don't. What do you need? What do you think? And they give us feedback, and then all our sales have been gotten by doing that. Just nobody in agriculture buys over the internet. It's few and far between.
And do they buy this as a fixed cost and maybe get a loan for it, whatever, but buy it as a fixed cost? Or is leasing something that they start doing? Because in construction, it's become so common, right? So United Rental, you see a lot of that.
Yeah.
What about
Um,
agriculture?
yeah, there's the majority of farmers they like to own things. They don't like to lease things. They like to own it. Um, and that mindset. But there are some that want to lease, and they want to do a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year lease with us. So it's typically we it's a fixed cost, and then but I'd say 10-20% of our have been from leases.
Okay. So I have one very last round for you, which kind of like culminates in the last question I try to ask to every guest. My question to you is, looking back at the history of the company so far, right? You guys are growing, you're selling tractors, you're getting a name for yourself. I actually got to know you guys through someone in the lawn mowing business
Okay.
that knew about Sabanto and knew that it was almost a household name in Iowa for the niche, right? And the company is growing, and it's interesting that you guys are deploying more and more, and it's certainly some form of validation. Uh, but this is a podcast also that has a lot of audience that's rooted into founding teams, and they want to know what went wrong and what you would change, right? So that they can avoid doing the same mistake. And so essentially the question I would ask you is much more general, as it's, we're backing away from the industry Zoom, and is, what would you do differently if you went back in time for Sabanto? What are the business hunches that you got wrong, or product hunches that you got wrong, if anything, right? So what would you reshuffle?
It was probably, and I think every startup, they get excited when they get a customer who believes in them and wants to work with them. But you have to realize that, and this happens in the ag industry, and I'm sure it happens in every other industry. Um, a lot of your supposedly customers, um, they're forward thinking. They want to try anything. They want to be the first person on the block that has done, XYZ. So early on, we had farmers lined up. I could call a farmer and I said, "Hey, I'm this crazy guy deploying this autonomous tractor, and it's going to perform a field operation. Can we work with you?" Every last one of them will say, "Hell yeah, bring it out. I want to see it. I want to run it on my farm." Right? Um, and you're obviously going to go out and you're going to have a lot of things aren't going to work. It's your minimum viable product. It's even before the minimum viable product. It's not even a viable product, but it will do things, and you're never going to get a sale. And so choose your initial customers and understand early on just what it's going to take. And I think it took me a while to figure that out. A couple things I learned is, number one, you have to pick a market. You can't be horizontal and be everything to everyone. The second thing I learned was I needed to do one field operation exceedingly well, as good, if not better, than manually operated. And when I would walk up to a farmer and if they ask me, "Hey, can you defoliate sugar beets?" Yes, we can do that. We can do anything given enough time, but focus or flounder. And early on we decided we are, and this really helped us. Um, even though we're corn, soybeans, we're row crop guys. The sod industry is an industry that they're willing to adopt autonomy more so than any other group of farmers that I've ever met, because they're out in the field day in and day out. I work with farming operations that cover 1 million acres in field operations every year. And so we went after the sod industry, and we are really, really good at mowing. And then it also turns out we're really good at aggravating, we're really good at seeding, and we're really good at rolling as well. But we're really, really good at mowing. And we can mow as good, if not better, than a human operator. And then now we're really, really good at broadacre seeding. Box drill, 70% less cost than your with your large equipment, and we're really good at that. So focus on just one little thing and then being the best at that.
And to that, I would ask you the very last one, which is essentially, for people still ideating their batshit crazy idea in their niche, they're still thinking about is this worth trying? Is this worth doing? Um, what's your advice to founders that are about to embark on a journey to solve a difficult problem, one that likely has to do with hardware, or it could be very difficult software, it could be a very difficult industry, but something that has so much headwind to it that nobody has even taken off? What would you tell them?
Well, A, go for it. B, make sure you practice your elevator pitch. And when people ask you, like you did this essentially, why are you different than the OEMs? What makes you different? And you have to answer that exceedingly well. And and what problem you're trying to solve. So just practice your answering your question, what problem you're trying to solve, and then what makes you different than everyone else. Because there's a lot of smart people out there, and that's the other thing too is a lot of people have really good ideas, but it's the joke I tell. I always say there's 9 birds sitting on a telephone wire. 1/3 of them decide to leave. How many are left?
My question is, it 6?
No, the answer is 9 because deciding to do something and actually doing it are 2 different things. So
Makes perfect sense.
yeah, and the fact that you're actually going out and doing it, speaks volumes.
Okay, awesome. Craig,
Yeah,
thank you so much for your time. It
thank you.
was really amazing. Let's hope we can do a part 2. And I hope that people now will know, if they see some video of a driverless tractor, they just don't think it's a Rogue One with a stone on the pedal, and it's probably something that you guys have retrofitted and helped farmers with. So I really
Well,
thank you for
hopefully.
your time.
All right. Well, thank you.